So I'll try and be fairly quick, if that's okay. And I enjoyed, I heard many different things. Somebody said that ethics, you had to repeat things all the time. So I'm going to have to repeat myself and reiterate things, but to remind you the characteristics of some frameworks, ethical frameworks in medicine. We talked about the constraints of these frameworks and the context in which they're used, such as Public Health Quebec as well. Now, in 2017, there was already 56 frameworks which had been listed, and you might imagine that today there are quite a few more than 56, because we've had a pandemic, amongst other things. But so I imagine, I dare say that today, that the number is much higher, in terms to ethical frameworks presented. Rather than presenting them, I'm going to skim over a couple of them and look at the classification frameworks and those of which arrested most attention within the public health policy. Now, the major classics are, the first one is Nancy Cass, and her Joe Percy and her collaborators, and I'm not being very nice, but I'm going to talk about this quickly. And that of Cass is, well, she was in 2001, and this has raised questions which refer to ethics, but what are the objectives of the action? What are the values important which need to be borne in mind within the analysis of dynamic framework? Now, we called it a pragmatic framework. I don't know if it is really in that category, but the ethic frameworks, there's got a few questions which the questions are fairly close to the concerns that flagged up by Public Health France. So I won't dwell upon it at length, but you can see what the key questions are. You've got what are the objectives. Okay, now moving on to the next frame. Next sort of seminal work on ethics in public health is by Upshur, Principles for the Justification of Public Health Intervention in 2002. So talking about the social values such as solidarity, this is a major concern. Social solidarity came up a great deal in these frameworks, but I won't present you in all its glory and splendor, but we're trying to reduce as much as possible the freedom of people, because we're trying to use the means which are least constraining or the least coercitive, though, to do so. Now you've got Childress, who also did a reference work on public health ethics, mapping the terrain. Now, she picked up a lot on what the previous two did, but she talked to the respect of commitments, maintaining transparency, and maintaining contact with the populations. Now, in this text, the focus on transparency and disseminating information. Next slide, please. So they're trying to take into account other considerations, the idea of trying to get a right balance between autonomy and freedom and the constraints. And of course there is the question of public justification that they raise as well. So now we've got this report. The first ethics frameworks present the values, the classical cases involved, and then we can see whether these objectives are achieved or not by the objectives proposed. Now, in some cases, try and see how theory lands in the field, how it sort of converts into practice. So for some authors, this concern, what is the most appropriate theory, which is the right one or the most justifiable, we can apply to for ethics in the public health domain. Now, of course, when you focus on values, the first few works weren't very explicit there, but here you have to focus on arbitrating between different values, for example, autonomy versus health and well-being. And how do you arbitrate? How do you go about arbitrating about this in the field? But there doesn't seem to be a clear method when proceeding to make this analysis. And thank you, Lisa, for changing the slide. The various classifications were proposed for ethics frameworks. Now this one here, Lee 2012, which is based on the theories, and the ones which are based on theories and the others seem to be based on practice. The starting ones are based on theory, which of people Kenny, Show and Bayliss, working in 2008, working in Nova Scotia or near Canada, seeking to establish ethical standard practice. They're trying to, as a relationship-based conception of all independence, autonomy. And based on practice, it's seeking to react to ethical concerns by using the language of professionals. And but the first one, it tends to focus on it talks about solidarity, great. Now, we've got other cases we know are based chiefly on practice, which seek to cater to concerns by using the language of professionals. The one drafted by Cass in 2001 is a case in point. The other classifications have been offered at equitable frameworks between traditional ones, the expansive ones, and the mixed or hybrid ones. So the idea, the ones which are concerned by arbitrating between freedom and the common good. Now, I won't dwell upon examples at length, but the expansive classifications are focused on equity or fairness in the community, whereas the traditional ones focus on protecting freedom and autonomy. And in fact, the traditional ones seem to underscore the importance of freedom and autonomy, while the mixed ones tend to place the cursor on arbitrating on between two fundamental values. Now, what are the advantages and drawbacks of these classical frameworks in public health, or the ethics in public health? Well, the advantages are one significant one. It could be useful introduction to values in public health. It helps us to establish what we consider important, and it provides you with kind of a checklist, but can also be done without sort of drawing upon any support. If I provide you with a framework of this kind, I don't necessarily need to support you in implementing it or to see, however, they do contain drawbacks. Sometimes some you give priority to some values over others. For example, ascribe more importance to freedom, whereas others might ascribe more importance to solidarity. And so you have these pre-arbitrations that are done in advance. And they may be also, as a drawback, considered as a closed models. And they may be difficult to be used by professionals. So you might say, what do these values? Do we incorporate them or not? But it also might be difficult to use by the professionals. And we might wondered, do we have to use all the values, or do we select some of the values? That might be the difficulties run into by people trying to use them or deploy them. Now, to respond to these concerns, we can see an increasing number of pragmatic frameworks which try to form the strategic or in-depth thinking of professionals on different constituent parts. This one of Grill and Dawson from 2015 seeks to provide it tries to identify the approach which is most relevant and the most justified. Now, what you understand is the call for values. It depends on if you consider emphasis X is justifiable, then you can justify it, but it goes further than the previous ethical frameworks which we've touched upon. Now, the case of the Ethics Committee for Public Health, for which I work in Canada, it's the more case of Green and Dawson. So it's been adapted from 1999. That was the first version that came out at the very beginning. Then we had another version. Well, there was ethics in engineering in 1991, but that's quite some way removed from public health, ethics in engineering. But the method used, a bit like that of Grill and Dawson, well, I won't dwell upon the characteristics. Marcel's going to present them. It's the same kind of operation, if you like, where the questions are asked about the reasoning or the rationale you might have, and a committee, we accompany the people on the values and that we've published the process as well. We've done a sort of a listing of the values in 2015 and the publication of the process in 2017. And now, what are the constraints? What are the limits of these ethical frameworks? Well, if we consider that the ethical framework is a tool, you can say it's part of organizational values. You may say it's a necessary step, but it's not just a framework you want to disseminate to various teams and divisions. But first of all, what does it require? It requires a certain willingness or proactiveness that ethics should be identified in overarching documents of overarching importance that might be described in messages or in reports or accounts, or leaders, the senior manager would say, consult the ethics departments. And it also depends on the people that you're dealing with. You may have ethics champions or ethics ambassadors in organizations where considered the ethics are of particular import. And it depends to the extent this has been incorporated company. There may be training programs or modules provided. You may have ethics departments or ethics services, or a people or a dedicated person who focus on ethics. It might take the form of a one-off or bits of a voice. It might take the form of various forms of regular combination, training programs, but they actually have to be designed and put together. It also may be specific tools to answer to questions raised by your team members. Also may take part in publications of scientists when the questions keep recurring, and it's important to address the recurring questions. And of course, you can refer people to a committee like the CAD here, like the Committee on Orientation Dialogue or the National Advisory Ethics Committee, when a problem is raised and it requires an external opinion or an independent opinion on the matter in hand. Now, the challenges and the opportunities, well, challenges, what might be harming us in ethic terms? What's the distinction between experience of public health experience and the ethics in research? We talked earlier on about external committees which assess the compliance or not of various project of a given project, or people who do research in institutions like these. They might think that ethics and public health go hand in hand, but the idea that the National Ethics Committee, the Committee for Orientation Dialogue don't want to proceed in that particular way because we feel it is not advantageous. What you do have is juxtaposition of scientific work against ethical thinking. Some people, I'm a scientist, I can answer scientific questions, but ethics doesn't fall within my remit. And these messages are amplified by the position one has at the National Institute for Scientific Practice. If we go beyond a given scientific practice, well, people might remark that it can be a problem of course, we have to sort of inform and educate people. But if the problem is a recurring one, you really have to get to grips with it sooner or later. But the inherent objectives of public health, well, this refers back to the work of public health professionals. And people just say, I just do public health. So the objectives of what I do are always objectives to maximize, with a view to maximizing public health. So in those cases, it's important to recall that public health initiatives implemented in a social context, important to underscore that they'll affect the lives of other people. Now, some people say the challenge is that ethics and ethics approaches, that they are long, they're drawn out, they're complicated, but it depends a great deal on the needs expressed by the people questioned. It's not easy to provide just short-term or quick support for people in ethics. It tends to be in a very specific contract. You have to define the expectations of professionals, because you might get a very long and detailed opinion, but sometimes you adjust things and to quickly respond to people's concerns. But at the Ethics Committee of Public Health in Canada, we did this a lot in the pandemic. The work took a week. It is possible to work very quickly when you've got the resources available. Now, the opportunities now. Now we have to adapt. One has help and adapt as to be centered on needs. We might be tempted in ethics to give answers which are very complex, which are very weighted, are very abstract, following specific indications, but you have to adapt to the level of the health professionals concerned and try and respond to the concerns, because sometimes they don't necessarily need very abstract or complex responses. Sometimes we have to work against one's natural instinct to provide very complex, detailed, or very full, detailed responses. But you need to try and identify persistent or recurring problems And I think we talked about things that are on some questions crop up time again. So it's really worth it to look at those long and hard with the health professions concerned and try and act. And this might serve as a variable. It demonstrates in what you're capable of doing, how you might persist in future. And of course, repeat, or reiterate. So that the people who leave the profession, that other people come in, there also organize those changes. So amongst people that have been there for a long time, you still have to keep repeating the approach. What were you trying to do, how are you trying to do it? And you can help them to work more generally speaking.